Hey there, I'm Stephen Kesting, and this is the Strenuous Life Podcast. So there's an idea. It has to do with martial arts, but it also has many applications in other areas of life. And it's an idea that I've been touching on in recent podcasts on this, my podcast, and also on other people's podcasts when I've been a guest there, like Coach Rodney King. He's a martial arts guy from South Africa. And it has to do with the intersection of ideas like testability and falsifiability and thinking for yourself and resisting the temptation to subsume your own decision making by giving all that power to somebody else. So let me talk about it, and let me start with some real basic examples. In jiu-jitsu, if you think that you've got this amazing new setup for the armbar, you're pretty sure that it's going to work. You can go and test it. You can go and try it out the next day on your training partner. You can go and try it out on the white belts at the club if you're a little bit more experienced. You can go and try it on the people who are lighter than you. And you can go and test it. And if it works, that's great. And if it doesn't work, well, then either you need to work on it some more, or it was never meant to be. It was one of those rabbit holes that you went down that didn't really have a productive ending. And I've gone down so many of these rabbit holes, it's unbelievable. The technique just didn't work for me. It didn't work for my body type. It didn't work for my attributes. It doesn't work for anybody under any circumstances ever, except for the one guy who's showing it on YouTube. You know, it's very easy to go down rabbit holes, but at the same time, in jiu-jitsu, it's also easy to test things. You can test things, and there's this idea of falsifiability. My hypothesis, my idea, is that this is the best armbar setup ever. We can go and test it, and either it is or it is not. Or you can get more granular. My idea is that the best way to shut down my friend over-under guard pass is to do this. I can go and try it. And at the end of that training session, I'll either have a yes, a no, or a maybe, right? But it's inherently falsifiable. If it totally doesn't work at all, then I know I have to go back to the drawing board. And this is true for most of the martial arts that are known as combat sports. It's true in judo. It would be true in fencing. It'd be true in boxing. It's true in kickboxing. It's true in MMA. If you have this great idea for a takedown setup in MMA, right? Jab, cross, leg kick, and then I'm going to shoot my low single. Whatever. I'm just making that up off the top of my head. You can go and test it in sparring. You can go and test it against full resistance, somebody who's really not trying to let you leg kick them, somebody's really trying to not let you take them down, and you can try it out. And it's falsifiable. It either works or it doesn't. Now we're going to contrast that to most of the traditional martial arts. My very first martial art was judo, but then I went down the rabbit hole of kung fu for many years. And I was doing Hung Gar Kung Fu and Northern Shaolin Kung Fu and Southern White Crane Kung Fu and a few other types. And there were a whole lot of promises made and a whole lot of promises implicit in the training. If you keep on working your form, your kata, then you will become a good martial artist. If you keep on working these techniques in the context of the Tiger Crane form, then one day, so long as you've done the form enough times, 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times, when somebody tries to punch you in the face for real, out will pop your tiger claw technique, out will pop your crane beak deflection, your crane beak eye poke, and your groin kick. They'll just magically appear because you've done the repetitions within the form, because you've worked hard enough at that. That is a promise. I mean, this is kind of spoofed by something like the Kill Bill series, where in the end, Uma Thurman kills Bill with a 5-point palm exploding heart technique. That's usually my go-to example of something that you can't actually test. Your Sifu would tell you, young Stefan Grasshopper, if you hit these 5 pressure points in sequence, the person's heart will explode. That's an untestable hypothesis. You can't actually try that many times in training before you have no training partners left. So another example, back in the day, There was a guy who used to publish articles in Inside Kung Fu, I think it was, although it might have been black belt, might have been both. And he claimed to be an iron palm master. So there'd be photos of him smacking a pile of bricks and the sixth brick exploding. Now, that's obviously pretty easy to fake, even in the era before Photoshop. But the best part of his whole entire shtick was that he had developed the chi energy, the negative chi energy in his left hand to such a degree that he could not hold a baby in that hand. Because if he held a baby in that hand, the chi would go into the baby and kill it. So, although this would be a testable hypothesis, if you gave that guy a baby and it did not die, that would be a way to test it. I don't think it ever was tested. Nobody ever did an expose and, hey, well, let's start safe. Let's put a guinea pig in your hand and see if it dies. Oh, well, the guinea pig didn't die. Let's put a kitten in your hand and see if it dies. Well, the kitten didn't die. All right, anyone want to volunteer a baby? I'm sure somebody from the Skeptic Society would have volunteered their baby. And I'm 99.999% sure that the baby would have been okay. The key point here is testability. The combat sports allow you to test things like your technique, your timing, your footwork, your angles again and again and again in sparring. It allows you to throw out the stuff that doesn't work. Either it doesn't work in general, or doesn't work for you, or doesn't work for you yet. But it allows you to separate the wheat from the chaff. And you get very, very quick feedback from your sparring partners as to what worked and what didn't. If you try a technique and you end up getting punched in the nose, or the guy ends up passing your guard and choking you out, or in the case of fencing, you try this combination, the guy parries you and hits you, you just got feedback from the universe, or rather, feedback from your training partner that it didn't work. The key point here is it allows you to test stuff. It allows you to be a little bit skeptical. When you see something on YouTube, after you've been doing jiu-jitsu for a while, your first reaction isn't, this is awesome, this is the best technique ever. Your first reaction is, oh, I want to see if that works. Hey Bill, come on over here. I saw this thing on YouTube, and the guy grabbed here, and the guy grabbed there, and then he did this, and the guy tapped, and holy crap, it worked. Okay, you just kind of tested it, and it kind of sort of worked, as opposed to the traditional martial arts systems where you never really ever found out that it worked or didn't work. Incidentally, the funny thing is, you took guys who'd been training Kung Fu for years and years and years, and you put boxing gloves on them, and you let them hit each other, what came out was nothing resembling the traditional Kung Fu at all. Not even close. It ended up very quickly looking like super bad kickboxing. No, that's just a side note. So, how does this idea of testability apply in other areas? Well, if you're approaching everything from a let's see if this works point of view, then it gets you a little bit further away from this, oh, my sifu, my guru, the head instructor told me this would work, and therefore it has to work. Therefore I have to take his advice. And it's interesting, even the terminology. The combat sports, there's a little bit more of a tendency to call the head instructor a coach, or even professor, which I don't like as much. But in terms of master or grandmaster or grand poobah, that's not as common. And so by having this testing mentality, we're a little bit more likely to take his advice with a grain of salt. When he says, sell all your earthly possessions and say goodbye to all your relatives and move into the dojo, people are less likely to do it. It's not impossible. It has happened. There have sort of been cult-like situations within the combat sports, but it's a lot less common than in the traditional martial arts because there's this slightly skeptical and testing-based attitude to things. The same thing applies to business. As I run an internet business, tons of people are giving me advice. Hey, Stefan, you should totally do this with grapple arts. This is absolutely going to work because it worked for me in this website that I do for dog training in Ireland. I've got this Irish dog training site and it's totally killed it for me, and you should do it. Or you should move your whole business onto Facebook, or you should move your whole business onto Instagram, or you should do this or you should do that. Coming at it from a testing point of view, what all these fantastic and often well-meaning suggestions are, they're just hypotheses for further testing. Somebody tells me I should send out all my emails at midnight because that's when hardly anybody gets any emails. And if you send them all out at midnight, yes, not as many people are up, but the people who are up are going to open your emails. Well, you know what? Maybe that worked for some guy in a different niche or niche. I prefer niche because quiche isn't pronounced kitsch. Anyhow, in a different niche, for a different audience, for a different demographic, for a different product, maybe that worked there. If I think it's a really interesting thing, I can do a small test and I can see if that also works for me. There is no such thing as the absolute grand unified truth, because if there was the absolute grand unified truth, then most people would be doing it. If it was the one thing that worked best everywhere, then very quickly everyone would be doing that. I would like to think that practicing combat sports like jiu-jitsu, MMA, boxing, kickboxing, fencing, full contact stick fighting, judo, wrestling, submission grappling, things like that, help inoculate us from giving up our personal responsibility and giving up our personal decision making. Because there are plenty of times when your coach is going to say, hey, this works. And you're going to try it out and you go, well, that didn't really work as well as I thought it would work. And there's going to be many times when you learn something that your coach didn't teach you. So getting away from this cultish mentality. Getting away, the extreme example here is something like the Heaven's Gate cult, which in the 90s was busy telling everyone that there was a spaceship behind the comet Hale-Bopp, and that if you killed yourself while wearing a black, I think it was a black t-shirt and sweatpants, and had $5.75 in your pocket, if I remember correctly, that you would then ascend and join the chosen on this spaceship behind the comet. So where's the testability in this? That was 100% based on the word of the guru, the word of the cult leader. There's no way to test that, and people ultimately paid the ultimate price. They died. They killed themselves. Once again, I'm not saying combat sports don't have their share of cultish behavior, but I think it's less. I think it encourages a more scientific mindset about figuring out what works for you, what techniques work for you, and what your particular truth is in a situation. Like I said, this is just something that has been on my mind. I think it's a valuable way to approach jiu-jitsu. It's a valuable way to approach business. It's a valuable way to approach life. What works for somebody else might not work for you, and never just accept the word of somebody without some level of critical thinking, demanding some kind of proof, and trying to find a way to test what it is they're telling you. Try to falsify it. There has to be a way to prove that that's wrong, and if you can't prove that it's wrong for long enough, you know what? Then it might just be right. Take care, and I'll talk to you another day. Podcast listeners, there's a pretty good chance that you're listening to this on your smartphone, right? You're walking around, you got your smartphone in your pocket, you got your earbuds in, you're listening. If you've got a smartphone and you do jiu-jitsu, then you should check out my free Roadmap for BJJ app. This is a video-based app. It's an app that goes on your phone. You can check out the different sections. It's got different techniques. It's got different positions. And it breaks down the big picture of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for you so that you're not going to be so lost on the ground when you're training. So you're going to know kind of, sort of what you should be doing in every position, along with the specific techniques that you should be using. So if you go to grapplearts.com/roadmap, there'll be links there to get this app for free, both in the iTunes store, if you've got an iPhone, or in the Android store, if you've got an Android phone. There's also Kindle versions of it out there as well. Once again, you can grab that at grapplearts.com/roadmap. That'll point you in all the right directions to get this app, whatever kind of phone you have.